the Veiled Princess. First document. The Zephyrian royal palace stretched across the crystal cliffs like a frozen waterfall, its translucent walls catching the triple sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and violet. Within its halls, silence had become a language of its own, spoken fluently by everyone except the humans who had recently arrived as part of the Galactic Trade Alliance. Captain Marcus Chen of the human diplomatic vessel. Endurance stood at the observation deck, watching the alien nobility glide through the palace gardens below. Their movements were graceful, almost dance-like as they maintained careful distances from one another. Each Zephyrian wore flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and their elongated limbs moved with an ethereal quality that reminded him of deep-sea creatures. "Sir, we've been here 3 weeks and haven't made any real progress," Lieutenant Sarah Kim reported, approaching with a tablet containing their diplomatic status updates. "The Zephyrians keep scheduling meetings, then canceling them. They're polite, but distant. Very distant." Marcus nodded, his weathered face reflecting years of interstellar diplomacy. "Different species, different customs. We knew this wouldn't be easy." He paused, watching a group of Zephyrians suddenly change direction when their paths would have intersected. "Have you noticed how they never get close to each other? Like they're all carrying invisible force fields?" "The cultural briefings mentioned something about personal space being sacred to them," Sarah replied, "but this seems extreme. Look there." She pointed to the garden where a Zephyrian had dropped what appeared to be a small device. Other Zephyrians nearby noticed, but made no move to help retrieve it. Instead, they continued walking, leaving the individual to struggle alone. A soft chime echoed through the observation deck, indicating an incoming message. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Ambassador Veltar, the Zephyrian official assigned to handle human relations. His face was noble and angular, with large silver eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. "Captain Chen," Veltar began, his voice carrying musical undertones common to his species. "I regret to inform you that tomorrow's scheduled audience with our Royal Council has been postponed indefinitely." Marcus stepped forward. "Ambassador, with respect, this is the 4th postponement. The Galactic Trade Alliance is eager to establish formal relations with Zephyr Prime. What seems to be the issue?" Veltar's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his silver eyes. "There are complications, cultural matters that must be resolved before formal proceedings can begin. I trust you understand." After the transmission ended, Marcus found himself staring out at the palace gardens again. Something was wrong here, something beyond simple cultural differences. The Zephyrians weren't just maintaining distance from humans, they were maintaining distance from everyone, including their own kind. "Sir," Sarah said quietly, "I've been analyzing the behavior patterns. It's not random. There's something they're all avoiding." Before Marcus could respond, a figure appeared in the garden below that made both humans freeze. Moving along a marble pathway was a Zephyrian unlike any they had seen before. This individual was completely covered in flowing veils of deep purple and silver, with only the faintest outline of their form visible beneath the fabric. What struck Marcus most was how the other Zephyrians reacted to this veiled figure's presence. They didn't just maintain their usual distance. They actively fled. As the veiled figure walked, every other Zephyrian in the vicinity found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. They didn't run, for that would be undignified, but they moved with purpose that suggested barely controlled panic. Within moments, the entire garden section was empty, except for the solitary, veiled individual. "Who is that?" Sarah whispered. Marcus activated his communicator. "Ambassador Veltar, please respond." The reply came quickly. "Yes, Captain Chen?" There's an individual in the palace gardens wearing purple and silver veils. Everyone seems to be avoiding them. Can you explain who this person is?" A long pause followed. When Veltar finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "You should not concern yourself with such matters, Captain. There are aspects of our society that outsiders cannot understand. Ambassador, we're here to build understanding between our peoples. How can we do that if there are things we cannot discuss?" Another pause, even longer this time. "Very well. What you have observed is Princess Zaralyn, youngest daughter of our emperor. She is cursed." Marcus exchanged glances with Sarah. "Cursed how, Captain? There are forces in this universe that your human science has yet to understand. Princess Zaralyn carries within her a touch of the void between stars. She is dangerous to be near. This is why she remains veiled, why she walks alone. For the safety of all." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the two humans staring at each other in confusion. The void between stars? Sarah pulled up her cultural database. "I'm not finding any reference to that in our briefings." Marcus continued watching the veiled figure below. She had stopped near a fountain and was sitting on its edge, perfectly alone in what should have been a bustling garden. There was something profoundly sad about the scene, something that resonated with his human sense of empathy. "Sir, you're not thinking of approaching her, are you?" Sarah recognized the look on her captain's face. The briefings were very clear about respecting Zephyrian cultural taboos. "Were they clear about abandoning someone who might need help?" Marcus replied. "Look at her, Sarah. When was the last time you saw someone sit that still? That alone?" Below in the garden, Princess Zaralyn remained motionless by the fountain. Through her veils, she could sense the humans watching from above, just as she could sense every other living being in the palace. It was part of her curse, this ability to feel the life force of others, to touch the spaces between reality that most beings couldn't perceive. She had been born this way, marked by powers that her people feared and couldn't understand. The veils weren't just for others' protection, they were for her own sanity. Without them, the constant bombardment of sensations from the void between stars would drive her mad. She had learned to live with the isolation, to find peace in solitude. But sometimes, like now, the loneliness felt heavier than the curse itself. The water in the fountain rippled in patterns that didn't match the wind. Small objects near her began to hover slightly, responding to energies that leaked from her despite her best efforts to contain them. This was why everyone feared her. This was why even her own family kept their distance. She sensed movement above and knew the humans were still watching. Strange beings, these humans. Unlike her people, they seemed drawn to things they didn't understand rather than repelled by them. Their emotional signatures were different too, warmer somehow. Less controlled than the careful calm her people maintained. "Princess," a voice spoke softly behind her. Zaralyn didn't turn. She had sensed Ambassador Veltar's approach long before he spoke. "You should not be here, Uncle. Nor should you be sitting where others might see you," he replied gently. "The humans are curious about you. Let them be curious. It changes nothing." Veltar moved closer than anyone had dared in years, though he still maintained a careful distance. "Perhaps it changes everything. They are not like us, these humans. They don't fear the unknown the way we do." "They should." Zaralyn's voice carried a weight of sadness. "I have seen what lies in the spaces between stars, Uncle. I have touched the darkness that hungers for light. They should fear me as you all do. And yet they watch you with concern, not terror." For the first time, Zaralyn turned slightly. "Concern? The captain asked about you. Not as a threat to be avoided, but as an individual to be understood. When I told him you were dangerous, do you know what he did? He asked more questions instead of walking away. Zara Lynn felt something stir within her, something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. It was dangerous, she knew. Hope had hurt her before, when she was younger, and still believed that someday someone might see past the curse to the person beneath. It doesn't matter, she said finally. I am what I am. Changing species of observer doesn't change the nature of the observed. But even as she spoke, she found herself wondering about these humans. Their emotional patterns were unlike anything she had encountered. Where her people radiated careful control and measured distance, the humans seemed to burn with something much more intense. Passion, perhaps, or courage. Above on the observation deck, Marcus had made his decision. "Sir, please reconsider," Sarah pleaded as he headed for the door. "We don't know what touched by the void means. It could be dangerous." "Everything worth doing is dangerous," Marcus replied. "Besides, she's sitting alone by a fountain. How dangerous can she be?" "Famous last words," Sarah muttered. But she followed him anyway. As they made their way through the palace corridors, they encountered several Zephyrian servants and minor nobles. Each one, upon learning their destination, reacted with expressions that ranged from shock to horror. Some tried to discourage them with warnings about ancient curses and powers beyond understanding. Others simply fled. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" Sarah said as they approached the garden entrance. "We're diplomats," Marcus replied. "Our job is to build bridges between species. Can't do that if we're afraid to cross them ourselves." The garden was eerily quiet as they emerged into the fading light of the triple sunset. The veiled figure remained by the fountain, seemingly unaware of their approach, though something told Marcus that she knew exactly where they were. As they drew closer, Marcus began to understand why the Zephyrians were afraid. The air around the princess seemed to shimmer slightly, and small objects near her moved in ways that defied physics. Flower petals danced in spirals with no wind to drive them, and the water in the fountain formed impossible patterns. But what struck him most was not the supernatural phenomena. It was the profound isolation radiating from the figure. She sat with the stillness of someone who had long ago accepted that she would always be alone. Marcus stopped about 10 feet away, closer than any Zephyrian had dared to come in years. "Your Highness?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the veiled figure turned toward them. Through the layers of fabric, he caught a glimpse of silver eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. "You should not be here," Princess Zara Lynn said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people but tinged with something else. Surprise, perhaps. "It is dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. The question seemed to catch her off guard. In all her years of isolation, no one had ever asked for details about her curse. They simply accepted it as fact and maintained their distance. "I am touched by the void between stars," she said, as if this explained everything. "And what does that mean, exactly?" Zara Lynn was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the strange phenomena intensified slightly. A small stone lifted from the ground and began orbiting her at head height. The water in the fountain started glowing with a soft, internal light. "It means I can perceive and manipulate the spaces between reality," she said finally. "The gaps where physics doesn't quite work the way it should. My people believe that prolonged exposure to my presence can damage others, drive them mad, worse." Marcus looked around at the floating objects and glowing water. "Has it ever actually hurt anyone?" Another pause. No, not directly. But the risk. So you've been isolated your entire life based on a theoretical risk?" Sarah interjected, her scientific mind engaging with the puzzle. "It is not theoretical," Zara Lynn said sharply. "The power is real. I can feel it constantly, pressing against the barriers I maintain. If I were to lose control—" "Then don't lose control," Marcus said simply. The floating stone stopped orbiting and dropped to the ground with a small splash in the fountain. For the first time in years, Princess Zara Lynn found herself genuinely speechless. It's not that simple. Isn't it?" Marcus stepped closer, now only 5 feet away. "You've maintained control this long. You're maintaining it now, even while talking to strangers who are probably stressing you out. Seems to me like you're doing pretty well." The glow from the fountain water began to fade. "You don't understand. My people have studied this for generations. The risk—" "Your people haven't studied it," Sarah said, consulting her tablet. "They've just been afraid of it. There's a difference. Fear makes you avoid something. Study makes you understand it." Zara Lynn turned to face them fully now, her veils shifting in a way that suggested she was reassessing these strange humans. "You truly do not fear what I am?" Marcus smiled. "Your Highness, I've negotiated with the Crystalline Collective, where one wrong word can literally shatter their entire delegation. I've had dinner with the Hive Queens of Kepler 442b, where thinking too loudly is considered an act of war. I've seen Sarah here jury-rig a warp drive with spare parts while we were being chased by space pirates. That was one time," Sarah protested. "My point is," Marcus continued, "every species has something that makes them unique, something that seems impossible or dangerous to others. What matters isn't what you can do. It's who you choose to be." For the first time in years, Princess Zara Lynn felt something crack inside her chest. Not the walls she had built to contain her power, but the barriers she had erected around her heart. "You speak of choice," she said softly. "I have never felt that I had any." "Everyone has choices," Marcus replied. "The question is whether you're brave enough to make them." As if summoned by their conversation, footsteps echoed across the garden. Ambassador Veltar was approaching, accompanied by several palace guards. His expression was one of barely controlled panic. "Captain Chen, you must step away from the princess immediately," he called out. "You do not understand the danger you are in." Marcus looked back at Zara Lynn, then at the ambassador. "The only danger I see is a young woman who's been alone for too long." "Captain, please," Veltar pleaded. "The curse, the legends—" "Are legends," Marcus finished. "Your Highness, would you like to join us for dinner tomorrow evening? Nothing formal, just a chance to talk with someone who doesn't run away." The silence that followed was profound. Every Zephyrian present seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for catastrophe to strike. The guards shifted nervously, hands moving toward weapons they weren't sure would be effective against forces they didn't understand. But Princess Zara Lynn felt something else entirely. For the first time in her adult life, she felt seen. Not feared, not avoided, not pitied, simply seen. "Yes," she said quietly. "I would like that very much." The floating objects around her settled gently to the ground. The strange shimmer in the air faded. Whatever forces she channeled seemed to calm in response to her emotional state. "Excellent," Marcus said with a smile. "Tomorrow at sunset, then. We'll have the meal prepared in the human quarters if that's acceptable. I think a change of scenery might do you good." As the humans walked away, leaving a stunned group of Zephyrians behind, Princess Zara Lynn remained by the fountain. But now, instead of the crushing weight of isolation, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Anticipation. The Veiled Princess. Second document. The human quarters aboard the Endurance, were a stark contrast to the flowing crystalline architecture of the Zephyrian Palace, where everything on Zephyr Prime seemed designed to maintain distance and separation. The human ship felt warm and intimate. The dining area was small but comfortable, with soft lighting and furniture that invited people to sit close together. Princess Zara Lynn stood outside the airlock, her veils stirring in the artificial breeze of the ship's atmospheric recycling system. She had never been aboard an alien vessel before. In fact, she had rarely been outside the palace walls. The invitation had been the most exciting thing to happen to her in years. But now that she was here, uncertainty crept through her mind like shadows. "Your Highness?" The voice belonged to Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who had emerged from the ship to greet her. "Captain Chen is looking forward to our dinner. Please come aboard." Zara Lynn followed Sarah through corridors that hummed with energy and purpose. Everything was functional but personal, with small decorations and photographs that spoke of lives lived fully. It was so different from the sterile perfection of her home. "I must ask," Zara Lynn said as they walked, "are you not concerned about being in an enclosed space with me? If my powers were to manifest strongly—" Sarah stopped and turned to face her. "Your Highness, can I speak plainly?" "Please do." "You've had these powers your entire life, correct? And in all that time, have you ever actually lost control completely?" Zara Lynn considered the question. "There have been incidents. When I was very young, before I learned to contain myself, but nothing catastrophic." "So you learned control through practice, not isolation." Sarah resumed walking. "Where I come from, we have a saying, 'The muscle you don't use becomes weak.' Same principle applies to self-control, I think." They entered the dining area where Captain Chen was setting the table. He had changed from his formal diplomatic attire into a simple civilian outfit, making the atmosphere feel more like friends gathering than an official function. "Your Highness," he said with a warm smile, "welcome aboard the Endurance. I hope you don't mind, but we've prepared human cuisine for tonight. Nothing too exotic, I promise." Zara Lynn found herself relaxing despite her nervousness. "I am grateful for any food that comes with conversation." As they began eating, the conversation flowed more naturally than Zara Lynn had expected. The humans asked about her people's culture, their art, their philosophy. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding rather than simply gathering information for political purposes. "So your people avoid physical contact entirely?" Sarah asked, cutting into what appeared to be some form of synthesized meat. "Not entirely," Zara Lynn replied. "But yes, we value what you might call personal space more than most species. Touch can be overwhelming for us. We sense emotions more directly than humans do, so physical contact can create uncomfortable intimacy. That must make relationships challenging," Marcus observed. "Indeed. Most Zephyrian partnerships are based on intellectual compatibility and shared goals, rather than what humans would call romance." Zara Lynn paused, then added quietly, "Of course, I have no personal experience with relationships of any kind." The statement hung in the air. Sarah reached across the table and gently touched Zara Lynn's veiled hand. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly lonely." For a moment, Zara Lynn tensed. Physical contact was so rare for her that even this gentle touch sent shockwaves through her nervous system. But rather than the painful overload she had always been warned about, she felt something else: warmth, comfort, connection. "You're not afraid?" she whispered, staring down at Sarah's hand covering hers. "Should I be?" Sarah asked softly. "Everyone else is." "Everyone else hasn't taken the time to get to know you?" Zara Lynn felt tears beginning to form behind her veils. She had forgotten what it felt like to be treated as a person rather than a dangerous object to be avoided. "Would you be willing to show us?" Marcus asked gently. "Your abilities, I mean." We'd like to understand what makes you so unique. I don't know if that's wise. You're in complete control here, Sarah said, still holding her hand. Nothing has to happen that you don't want to happen. Slowly, carefully, Zara Lynn allowed her mental barriers to relax just slightly. The air around her began to shimmer with barely visible energy. A salt shaker on the table lifted gently into the air, rotating slowly. The lights dimmed and brightened in a rhythmic pattern that seemed to match her heartbeat. Incredible, Sarah breathed. It's like you're manipulating local space-time fields. Is that what this is? Zara Lynn asked. My people have never understood the mechanics of it. They know only that it is dangerous. Marcus leaned forward, studying the floating salt shaker with scientific interest rather than fear. How does it feel when you do this? Like I'm touching something that shouldn't be touchable. The spaces between atoms, the gaps in reality itself. It's overwhelming if I don't maintain strict control. But you are maintaining control, Sarah pointed out. Even now, while showing us, you're keeping everything contained and safe. The salt shaker settled gently back onto the table. The lights returned to their normal brightness. But Zara Lynn felt something she had never experienced before. Pride in her abilities rather than shame. Your people fear what they don't understand, Marcus said. But from what I can see, you have a remarkable gift. Have you ever considered that the isolation might be making your control weaker, not stronger? What do you mean? Think about it. If you never practice using your abilities in social situations, how can you learn to manage them around others? It's like learning to drive by never getting behind the wheel. Zara Lynn was quiet for a long moment, processing this radical new perspective. You're suggesting that my isolation has been counterproductive? I'm suggesting that your isolation has been cruel, Sarah said bluntly, to you and to your people. They've missed out on knowing an extraordinary individual, and you've been denied the basic right to live a normal life. But the risk is manageable, Marcus interrupted. You've just proven that. You used your abilities in a controlled way, while having dinner conversation, and nobody got hurt. If anything, it was beautiful. Beautiful. The word seemed foreign to Zara Lynn. No one had ever described her powers as beautiful before. Like watching someone paint with light itself, Sarah said. Your Highness, has anyone ever told you that you might be an artist rather than a curse? The question hit Zara Lynn like a physical blow. She had never considered her abilities as anything other than a burden to be contained. The idea that they might be something positive, something creative, was revolutionary. No. No one has ever said that. Well, I'm saying it now, Marcus declared, and I'd like to make a proposal. What kind of proposal? Stay here for a few days on the ship. Help us understand your abilities better, and maybe we can help you understand them too. Scientific cooperation between our species. Zara Lynn's heart raced. You want me to stay here? With you? With us, Sarah confirmed. As colleagues, as friends if you'll have us. But my people, they would never approve. Your people don't have to live your life, Marcus said firmly. You do. And you're an adult who can make her own decisions about where she wants to be and who she wants to associate with. The concept of personal autonomy was so foreign to Zara Lynn that she struggled to process it. In Zephyrian culture, particularly for royalty, individual desires were always subordinate to societal expectations and cultural traditions. I've never made a decision like that before, she admitted. Then maybe it's time you started, Sarah suggested. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Marcus activated the display, revealing Ambassador Veltar's concerned face. Captain Chen, Princess Zara Lynn was expected to return hours ago. We are growing concerned for her safety. Before Marcus could respond, Zara Lynn stepped into the view of the camera. "Uncle, I am well. I am learning." "Your Highness, please return immediately. Your father is most displeased with this adventure." "Tell my father that I am where I choose to be," Zara Lynn said, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. Veltar's expression grew more concerned. "Your Highness." "You cannot be serious. The humans, they do not understand what you are." "Perhaps that is exactly why I should stay with them," she replied. "They see me as I am, not as what I might become under the worst possible circumstances." The transmission ended with Veltar looking thoroughly alarmed. "Well," Marcus said after a moment, "I think you've just made your first independent decision." "It feels terrifying," Zara Lynn admitted. "That's how you know it's important," Sarah said with a smile. Over the next few hours, the three of them talked late into the ship's night cycle. Zara Lynn learned about human culture, about the concepts of individual rights and personal freedom that were so central to human society. In return, she shared stories of Zephyrian history and art, painting a picture of a beautiful but rigid culture that prized order above all else. "Your people sound lovely," Sarah said, "but also exhausting. All that careful distance and controlled interaction." "It has its benefits," Zara Lynn said. "There is no conflict when everyone maintains their proper place." "But there's also no growth," Marcus pointed out. "No discovery, no chance encounters that change your life." "Like meeting you two." "Exactly." As the evening wore on, Zara Lynn found herself relaxing in ways she had never experienced. She allowed her veils to shift enough that her new friends could see glimpses of her actual face. She discovered that she could use her abilities in small ways to enhance their conversation, making the lights dance in time with music, causing their drinks to sparkle with harmless energy. "This is what your powers were meant for," Sarah said, watching tiny lights spiral through the air around them. "Beauty, wonder, joy." "My people believe they were meant as a warning," Zara Lynn replied. "A sign that some forces should not be touched." "Your people think small," Marcus said. "Where they see danger, I see possibility." "What kind of possibility?" Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. "We've been thinking about that. Your abilities to manipulate what you call the spaces between reality. That sounds very similar to theoretical work our scientists have been doing on dimensional physics." "Dimensional physics?" "The study of how different layers of reality interact," Sarah explained. "We think you might be naturally accessing dimensions that we can only theorize about." "Are you saying that my curse might actually be science?" "Advanced science that your people aren't ready to understand yet," Marcus confirmed. "But we might be." The implications of this conversation were staggering. If her abilities were natural rather than supernatural, if they were a gift rather than a curse, then everything she had been taught about herself was wrong. "I need time to think about this," Zara Lynn said quietly. "Of course. You're welcome to stay in one of our guest quarters tonight. Tomorrow we can talk more about what this might mean for you and your people." As Zara Lynn settled into the small but comfortable guest room, she found herself staring out the porthole at the stars. For the first time in her life, she felt hope for a future that might be different from her past. But she also knew that her choice to stay would not go unnoticed by her people. She was, after all, a princess, and princesses who made unauthorized decisions tended to face consequences. The next morning brought those consequences in the form of a full diplomatic delegation led by her father, Emperor Thisamar himself. Zara Lynn was awakened by Sarah knocking on her door. "Your Highness, you might want to see this." Outside the ship, a formal procession of Zephyrian nobles had assembled. Their flowing robes and ceremonial masks created an impressive display, but their body language spoke of tension and disapproval. "They've come for me," Zara Lynn said quietly. Only if you want to go, Marcus replied, joining them at the observation window. You're on a human ship. Technically, you're under our protection now. That would create a diplomatic incident. Some things are worth creating incidents over, Sarah said firmly. Emperor Thysamar stepped forward from the group, his presence commanding even at a distance. When he spoke, his voice was amplified to carry across the space between the ship and the delegation. Daughter, you will return with us immediately. This foolishness has gone on long enough. Zara Lynn looked at her two human friends, then activated the ship's external communication system. Father, I am no longer a child to be commanded. I am staying here to learn about myself. You are a danger to these beings, the Emperor replied. They do not understand what they risk by harboring you. With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus said, taking the communicator. We understand perfectly well. Your daughter is a remarkable individual with extraordinary abilities. She deserves the chance to explore those abilities in a safe environment. You court disaster, human. The curse of the void between stars has been contained for generations. To unleash it now would be catastrophic. The only catastrophe I see, Sarah interjected, is a young woman who's been isolated for most of her life because of fear and superstition. The Emperor's anger was palpable even through the communication system. You dare call our traditions superstition? I call unnecessary cruelty exactly what it is, Sarah replied without backing down. For several tense moments, no one spoke. The standoff between the human ship and the Zephyrian delegation stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Finally, Zara Lynn made her choice. Father, I will make you an offer. Give me 1 week to explore what these humans can teach me about my abilities. If, at the end of that week, I have caused harm or proven dangerous, I will return willingly and accept whatever restrictions you deem necessary. And if you prove that you can control these abilities, the Emperor asked, then you will allow me to make my own choices about how to live my life. The silence that followed was deafening. A princess demanding autonomy was unprecedented in Zephyrian culture. But Zara Lynn was no longer the frightened, isolated girl she had been just days before. 1 week, Emperor Thysamar said finally. But if there are any incidents, any hint of danger to others, you will return immediately. Agreed, Zara Lynn replied. As the delegation departed, Zara Lynn realized that she had just committed herself to proving something that even she wasn't sure was possible. She had 7 days to learn control that had eluded her for decades. But looking at her human friends, she felt something she had never experienced before, confidence that she might actually succeed. The Veiled Princess. Third document. The week that followed transformed everything Zara Lynn thought she knew about herself and her abilities. Under the patient guidance of the human scientists, she began to understand that her powers were not chaotic forces to be contained, but precise tools that could be learned and directed. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Endurance's chief science officer, had arrived via shuttle from the mothership specifically to work with Zara Lynn. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had always approached her abilities with fear and superstition, Dr. Vasquez treated them as fascinating natural phenomena worthy of scientific study. The key is understanding that you're not fighting your abilities, Dr. Vasquez explained as they worked in the ship's laboratory. You're learning to partner with them. Think of it like learning to dance with a partner who knows steps you haven't learned yet. Zara Lynn concentrated on a small crystal suspended in a containment field. Around it, space seemed to bend and twist as she carefully manipulated what she had learned to call dimensional interfaces, the points where normal reality connected to the deeper layers of existence. I can feel the pathways, she said, her voice filled with wonder. It's like there are roads through space that I never knew existed. Because your people told you to avoid those roads instead of teaching you to navigate them, Sarah observed from her position monitoring the energy readings. Look at these numbers, Doctor. She's maintaining perfect control even while actively manipulating dimensional barriers. Over the past 6 days, Zara Lynn had made discoveries that would have seemed impossible to her former self. Her abilities weren't random or dangerous when properly understood. They followed patterns, had rules, could be predicted and controlled. More importantly, she had learned that the key to controlling them wasn't suppression, but acceptance. Your people were trying to teach you to hold your breath forever, Dr. Vasquez had explained on the second day. Instead, we're teaching you to breathe properly. The difference was remarkable. Where once her abilities had felt like barely contained storms threatening to break free, they now felt like natural extensions of herself. She could make objects float with the precision of a surgeon, bend light into beautiful patterns, and even create small portals that allowed instantaneous movement across short distances. The applications are extraordinary, Marcus said as they reviewed the week's progress. Medical technology, transportation, energy generation, your abilities could revolutionize how we understand physics. But that's not the most important part, Zara Lynn replied, carefully returning the test crystal to its normal state. The most important part is that I finally feel like myself. For the first time in her adult life, she had spent an entire week without her veils. Working with the humans, she had discovered that physical contact actually helped her control her abilities rather than hindering them. Human emotional patterns seemed to provide a stabilizing influence that made her powers easier to manage. It's because humans are naturally curious rather than fearful, Dr. Vasquez had theorized. Your abilities respond to the emotional environment around you. Fear makes them chaotic. Wonder makes them beautiful. As if to demonstrate the point, Zara Lynn gestured gently and filled the laboratory with tiny points of light that danced like fireflies. Each one was perfectly controlled, perfectly safe, and absolutely beautiful. "Show off," Sarah said with a grin. "I never had anyone to show off for before," Zara Lynn replied, returning the smile. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from the Zephyrian Palace. Today was the 7th day, and her father would be expecting her decision. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked. Zara Lynn looked around the laboratory that had become more of a home to her than the palace ever had. Here, she was valued for who she was, rather than feared for what she might become. Here, she had friends who saw her abilities as gifts, rather than curses. "I'm ready," she said. "But I won't be going alone." The throne room of the Zephyrian Palace had never seen anything like the delegation that arrived that morning. Princess Zara Lynn walked at the center of a small group of humans, her face uncovered for the first time in decades. Around her, small lights danced in patterns that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, while tiny objects orbited her figure in graceful arcs. The assembled Zephyrian nobles backed away instinctively, their fear palpable. But Emperor Thissamar, seated on his crystalline throne, remained motionless as his daughter approached. "Father," Zara Lynn said, her voice carrying a confidence that hadn't been there a week before. "I have come to demonstrate what I have learned." "I can see that the humans have encouraged you to abandon all restraint," the Emperor replied coldly. "Your powers are fully manifested. You endanger everyone in this room." "Do I?" Zara Lynn asked. With a gesture, she caused every flower in the room's decorative arrangements to bloom simultaneously. The air filled with gentle music as she made the palace's crystal walls resonate in harmony. Light bent and danced around the throne room, creating patterns of impossible beauty, and through it all, nothing broke, nothing exploded, no one was harmed. "Your Majesty," Dr. Vasquez said, stepping forward, "your daughter's abilities are not chaotic forces of destruction. They are sophisticated tools for manipulating the fundamental structure of reality. With proper understanding and training, they pose no danger to anyone. You ask me to overturn generations of wisdom based on 1 week of observation? I ask you to see your daughter as she truly is, Marcus replied. A brilliant, capable woman who deserves the chance to live her own life. Emperor Thisomar studied his daughter carefully. She stood before him without veils, without fear, surrounded by manifestations of power that had terrified his people for generations. But there was no chaos in it, no sense of impending disaster. Instead, there was beauty and control that spoke of mastery rather than madness. "And what life would you choose, daughter?" he asked finally. "I choose to work with the humans," Zaralyn replied. "To learn more about my abilities and help others understand them. To be useful rather than hidden." "You would leave Zephyr Prime? Leave your people?" "I would visit them. But I can no longer live in isolation, pretending to be something I'm not." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Around the throne room, the assembled nobles watched nervously as their ruler considered this unprecedented situation. "You understand," he said finally, "that if you leave, there may be no place for you here when you return?" "Then I will make my own place," Zaralyn replied. "As the humans have taught me, sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose your own path." Ambassador Veltar stepped forward from the crowd of nobles. "Your Majesty, perhaps it is time we reconsidered our approach to such matters. If the princess has truly learned control—" "She has," Dr. Vasquez confirmed, "and she could teach others. Your Majesty, what if there are other Zephyrians with similar abilities who have been hidden away unnecessarily?" The implications of this question rippled through the throne room. For generations, any Zephyrian born with unusual abilities had been isolated and contained. But if those abilities could be controlled, understood, even used beneficially. "You propose to change the fundamental nature of our society," the Emperor said. "I propose to improve it," Zaralyn replied. "To give others like me the chance I never had." Emperor Thisomar rose from his throne and walked slowly toward his daughter. The floating objects around her settled gently to the ground, but the soft light remained, casting everything in a gentle glow. "Show me," he said quietly. "Show me that this is truly safe." Zaralyn extended her hand toward her father, palm up. In it, a small flower materialized, created from pure energy and shaped by her will. It was perfect in every detail, from the delicate petals to the subtle fragrance. "This is what my abilities can create," she said softly. "Beauty, wonder, joy. The choice between creation and destruction has always been mine to make. You taught me to choose neither, to hide from the choice entirely. The humans taught me to choose creation." The Emperor reached out and touched the energy flower. It felt real, smelled real, but pulsed with a warmth that spoke of the consciousness that had shaped it. "It is beautiful," he admitted. "She is beautiful," Sarah said firmly. "Your daughter is brilliant, kind, and capable of wonders that most beings can only dream about. The tragedy isn't that she has these abilities. The tragedy is that you've hidden her away for so long that you forgot who she really is." For the first time in decades, Emperor Thisomar really looked at his daughter. Not as a threat to be managed or a problem to be solved, but as the remarkable individual she had always been. "I have been afraid," he said finally, "for you, for our people. Fear makes even wise decisions feel like foolishness." "Fear kept me safe," Zaralyn replied gently, "but it also kept me from living. I don't want to be safe anymore, Father. I want to be alive." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Then you have my permission to make your own choices. But I ask one thing. Anything. Return to us sometimes. Help us learn what you have learned. There may be others who need to hear that their abilities are gifts rather than curses. I promise. As the formal audience ended and the nobles slowly dispersed, Zara Lynn found herself surrounded by her human friends in a corner of the throne room. The week that had changed her life was ending, but her new life was just beginning. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now I learn, Zara Lynn replied. About my abilities, about the universe, about myself. And I help others learn too. The Galactic Trade Alliance would be honored to have you as a cultural liaison, Dr. Vasquez offered. Your insights could help us understand dimensional physics in ways we've never imagined. And you'll have a home with us for as long as you want one, Sarah added. Zara Lynn felt tears forming in her eyes, tears of joy rather than sorrow. A week ago, she had been the veiled princess no one would approach. Now she was simply Zara Lynn, surrounded by friends who valued her for who she was, rather than fearing her for what she might become. Thank you, she said quietly, all of you, for seeing me. For being willing to be seen, Marcus corrected gently. As they prepared to leave the palace together, Zara Lynn took one last look around the throne room where she had spent so much of her life feeling like a prisoner. Now it just looked like a beautiful but empty space, lacking the warmth and connection she had found among the humans. Outside, the triple sunset was painting the sky in brilliant colors. Zara Lynn gestured gently, causing the light to dance and swirl in patterns that enhanced the natural beauty of the moment. Several Zephyrian servants stopped to watch, and for the first time, their expressions showed wonder rather than fear. Change begins with a single person choosing to be different, Dr. Vasquez observed, watching the servants' reactions. Or with friends choosing to see differently, Zara Lynn replied, thinking of the humans who had looked past her veils to find the person beneath. 3 months later, Zara Lynn stood on the observation deck of a massive exploration vessel, watching a new star system come into view. As the Galactic Trade Alliance's first specialist in dimensional phenomena, she had helped design new technologies that were revolutionizing space travel and communication. But more importantly, she had helped establish the first school for beings with unusual abilities. A place where gifts were nurtured rather than feared, where young people could learn control through understanding rather than suppression. The Kepler system looks beautiful, Sarah said, joining her at the observation window. Sarah had requested a transfer to the Exploration Division, partly to continue working with dimensional physics and partly because she had become one of Zara Lynn's closest friends. Every system looks beautiful when you're seeing it for the first time, Zara Lynn replied, allowing her abilities to create a small light show that enhanced the natural beauty of the stars. Any regrets about leaving home? Zara Lynn considered the question. She missed Zephyr Prime sometimes, missed the familiar crystal architecture and the musical quality of her people's voices, but she had received messages from her father telling her about young Zephyrians who were being trained rather than hidden, about abilities being explored rather than suppressed. No regrets, she said finally. This feels like home now. Through the viewports, the new star system awaited exploration. Somewhere among those worlds might be other species struggling with fears of their own uniqueness, other individuals being isolated because of abilities that seemed too strange or dangerous to understand. Zara Lynn smiled, thinking about the humans who had taught her that difference was something to be celebrated rather than hidden. Soon, she would have the chance to pass that lesson on to others. The veiled princess was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had learned that the most important tradition anyone could follow was the courage to be themselves. And as the ship moved toward new worlds and new possibilities, Zara Lynn filled the observation deck with gentle light that danced like joy made visible.